What's good, everybody? We are back for another edition of Champaign Room Hoops podcast, brought to you by the good folks at New Amendment. As part of the Beyond the Big Ten podcast network, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you get your podcasts, and on YouTube at Beyond the Big Ten. Also, make sure to follow along on all social media, Twitter, IG, and TikTok with the handle at Beyond the Big Ten. Again, I'm former Illini point guard Sam Maniscalco, joined by Illini legend Brandon Paul and former multiple-time Maddo winner Bill Cole. Thanks again for joining us. What's good with you two? It's been a while since we've been on the last few weeks.
Sam, what's good, man? Nothing really. Just hanging out, working, watching a lot of Illinois basketball, trying to get caught up for this podcast. So just kind of waiting for it to get warm again in Illinois so I can go hit the links.
I hear that.
It's good to see you boys, man. I'm good. I'm still out here in Germany playing. We just had a game tonight, big win for us. I think it solidified our spot as tied and first in our Euro Cup group. We played another former Chicago guy in Derek Needham. You guys remember that guy? Good dude. He's playing at a high level right now. He played at De La Salle. Yeah. Chicago kid. But I'm enjoying it out here, man. I'm the rookie and the vet out here. You know, I'm just trying to show these guys the ropes and trying to help them along the way. And I'm 31, feeling like I'm 34, 35 years old, 10 years deep in the game. So it's definitely a blessing to keep playing this game, you know.
How'd you play?
Play well, man. I shot 6 for 9 from 3. Thank you for asking. Finished with 19.
And Matt Meyer.
Exactly, yeah. I'm trying to channel my own Matt Meyer in there. So I caught fire in the second half for sure.
That's what's up, man. Bill, did you ever go 6 for 9 from 3?
Depends what level you're asking about.
Definitely at Peoria.
I think definitely had a few Richwoods games where I was going crazy against like Lake Zurich with a bunch of 5'7" dudes trying to guard me. And then I think I had 2 5-for-5 games, my career highs at Illinois, both 15 points, where I just act like you're allergic to the lane.
5 for 5 from 3?
I was definitely 5 for 5 against Minnesota. I think maybe the other one was like 4 for 5.
It's elite shooting, man. That's elite shooting.
Clip too. All right. So last we talked a couple weeks ago. It's been a while. There's been 3 games since. So let's get into a little bit of the X's and O's on the last few Illini games. So it's been a while since we've been on, and last time we talked, we were all together. The Illini were reeling off of a bad rivalry loss, versus Indiana at home. So we talked about them, having to take care of business versus an Ohio State team that was coming off a few losses themselves, get some home cooking, and they did that. But I think the big one is Wisconsin, right? So a rematch versus Wisconsin, the first time at State Farm Center in Champaign. Illini kind of got off the schneid and beat Wisconsin in a good game, one that they needed. But Wisconsin didn't have their best player, Tyler Wall. So go back to Wisconsin, Saturday afternoon game, an interesting game, almost like a tale of two halves, right? You have I think they said the lowest scoring half in the Big Ten thus far this year. And then the second half, obviously, Matt Meyer's story, which we can get into. But I thought just a good quality win on the road at a place like Wisconsin. Bill, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it. Historically, I mean, since we've all been playing at least like really strong program, they try and take the air out of the ball. They try and nullify what your team visiting there can do athletically. And I thought I was a little nervous for this game just with Tyler Wall being back. You touched on that. I watched a couple of his games in the non-conference. I thought he's just a phenomenal player, and we kind of nullified him this game. Our defense, now it's firmly within that top 10 in the country. I think it just shut them down, and it allows our offense to kind of get into flow, right? Because we all know we're a very streaky offensive team. We're not necessarily a great shooting team, but we can use our defense to create a lot of shots and create a lot of opportunities on the break. And then second half, I thought Coach Underwood's adjustments, whatever he said to them at halftime, just kind of allowed them to mentally lock in. I also think, one thing I didn't touch on the first time around was was it that Klesmit or Klesbit is I saw him talking a little junk to Matt Meyer, and I just think that was a really poor idea. We've all heard the term, like, why do it if you don't have to? Don't wake the sleeping dragon. And he's just too talented of a player. You could see him kind of lock in, and he hit some just monster shots. Even this whole 3-game stretch we're going to talk about today, I just think he's been phenomenal. So maybe there was a lot to his flu game performance against Indiana, because he looks stronger than ever right now.
Yeah, I mean, this, like you said, Bill, like, he came out with a chip on his shoulder, and he's been on the stage before, right? Get into the championship in his years with Baylor, and he's not afraid of the spotlight. And when he comes out and he's playing with that much confidence, he's one of the only players where you can look and he takes maybe a tough shot, maybe a shot you might not want, and you look the other way just because he's capable of making that type of shot. And he came out, put the team on his back, made some tough plays, and every time that he hit a shot, or even when he got a good look, whether it went in or not, you could see his confidence building. And the team recognized that, and they see that, and they respect him for that. So, hats off to Illini for figuring that out. And I think they're just a step closer to where they need to be as far as shot selection. It seems like at times they let teams off the hook. They're winning these games, and I feel like they have another step to take where they can take over, and it comes down to shot selection. And for me, shot selection and free throw shooting. If they start knocking down more free throws, they start valuing possessions a little bit more. They got another level where they're 10, 15 points better than each team that they play, and it's the Big Ten, so it's only gonna get tougher from here. But definitely a good few games that we got to see over the last week.
Yeah, and obviously the story in the Wisconsin game is obviously Matt Meyer, but a very underrated part of that game. I want to give a shout out to Dane Danger, because in the first half, Terrence Shannon Jr. is out with 2 fouls. They got nothing going offensively. He had a spurt where he scored 8 straight points that kind of kept him at bay. Now, granted, they were doing a good job on Wisconsin defensively, so they weren't exactly scoring at will either, but I thought he just did a good job of keeping them close, keeping them in the game, keeping them rolling with some sort of a rhythm. And then obviously the second half is the second half. But one thing I want to mention, and we've talked about it on previous podcasts, and Brandon, you kind of just touched on it, is we've mentioned this role defining, throughout these podcasts and throughout the season for these guys. And it's so much more evident now that roles are so much more defined, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to attribute some of it to which I think we glossed over a little bit. Before Ohio State, Sincere Harris was starting at point guard. And no offense or no knock on Sincere Harris, but I don't think he's a point guard. I don't think he's a starting point guard. Jaden Epps obviously is the guy that needs to have the ball in his hands and needs to be running the show, especially with the way he can score the basketball. I think when starting games with Jaden at the point, it just opens up so much more stuff for other guys to get rolling, and they just have more cohesion, more of a rhythm. But the roles have just been defined, right? Since Matt Meyer has emerged, him and Terrence have emerged as the engines kind of that make this offense go. Ty Rodgers has emerged as a glue guy, a great glue guy off the bench. Sincere Harris now is more in his natural role of coming off the bench, providing energy, getting into guys defensively and disrupting other teams. Coleman Hawkins even looks more comfortable, not trying to do too much, kind of playing off the others. So I just think role defining has come a long way, over the last few weeks since we've been talking.
For sure. The energy guys off the bench, right? I think that's where Sincere Harris is at his best. Like last night in the Nebraska game, when he can create things with his defense and really push the ball, I think that's what we miss a lot of when we're really bad on offense, is we kind of like walk the ball up the floor, and then it just sticks in some person's hand, and then you get that shot hunting that you see from some of the big three, like the Big 12 transfers, right? And I think, I'd love a statistician and maybe I'm just like biased to Bruce Weber basketball, but like really like getting that first outlet pass pushed up the floor and flattening out the defense. I think every time we do that, we get a much better shot. I think And it's tough to do that early on in games, right? Because the other team is so fresh. They're so locked in defensively those first couple possessions. So I do agree with you, Sam. I think it's a very natural switch to switch Jaden Epps, who's more of like a technical player. I'm just like, I'm in love with his game. I just don't remember a freshman, maybe since Brandon, obviously, that I was like such a natural scorer. And some of those plays he makes in big time moments, cutting to the rim when we need a basket. I love Dane Danger. You touched on that as well. I think it's so interesting. He just seems like he's not a Big Ten big, which I think is really good, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. I think some of the bigs in the Big Ten, they get recruited because they're 7'1" and they're huge and they don't move very well. And then you just see this guy that's like dropped into this conference, and it's almost the ability for him to just throw this post arsenal where it's really, I think someone said he was like leading the Big Ten in shot and field goal percentage. He doesn't take a ton of shots, but when he takes them, he makes them. He puts people on islands down in the post, and I just really love the setup and the recruiting. This freshman class, I think, all hats off to Coach Underwood. There's a lot to criticize this year, but his team building and his talent selection for what he wants to do, just super impressive.
Yeah, I mean, to the staff and the scouting and the recruitment, I mean, these guys know how to play. Like you said, Jaden Epps, for me, he had a much, much higher basketball IQ than I did as a freshman, for sure. It's not even close. He knows the right plays to make. He knows when he needs to drive the ball, knows when to shoot the ball. And, you know, for me, I was so talented enough to get something done, but he just knows where to pick his spots. Backing up from Dane Danger, like if you put his skill set next to like any big in the NBA right now, he's more skillful than a lot of the bigs in the NBA. Because, you know, a lot of these bigs want to pick and pop, they want to step outside. Obviously, outside of like Jokic and Embiid, like this guy is so talented in the post. He can go to either side. He reads the defense. He knows what they're giving him, and he doesn't force anything. And I think they need to go to him a little bit more. You know, there's some possessions where he might not touch it when they're trying to look at him, and he'll still find a way to be around the ball. You know, he'll wait for the shot to go up, and he'll just get in this position. So, you know, hats off to him. But I'm really excited about how well these guys have recruited. And you look at the bench, like you said, we talked about Ty Rodgers. And I spoke about it a few podcasts ago about him sitting a little bit, watching the game, letting the game come to him. And now he's coming in the game. He's making a lot less mistakes. And this guy is so good. The ceiling is high for him. The ceiling is high. He goes out, he defends whoever he needs to defend, 1 through 4. You know, once he develops a jump shot, you know, I heard Stephen Bartle talk about it in the last game. When this kid develops a jump shot, he's going to be on a lot of NBA radars. And, you know, Sincere Harris, he's a game changer. He comes in the game, defends. Sammy, I know you said that he's not a point guard, but he's not a shooting guard because he can't really shoot the ball. He's playing point guards, like, technically by committee, right? Like, he comes in, He has the size, he has the speed to pressure guards, and he brings so much tenacity on defense. He's one of those guys that has the ability to change the game.
Yeah, and I think, which I mentioned in a lot of previous podcasts, my biggest gripe with this season, especially on the offensive end, was that it was kind of helter-skelter, and there wasn't enough sets being called to get these guys in positions to be successful.
Right.
And to me, it's like the opposite now. I thought, especially in that Wisconsin game, the start of the second half, I think 5 or 6 possessions in a row, they ran a rub screen. They ran an entry to either Terrence Shannon or Matt Meyer, and they ran a rub screen for Dane Danger to come out and set a high ball screen with space. So that's an example of putting those two guys, your two best offensive threats, in a position to be successful. And I love that he did it 5 times in a row, right? Because they had success. And even if they didn't have success, they either got a good look or got something going in some kind of rhythm offensively. So I'm seeing more of that, which I know is what we kind of called for. And then, you know, the shot attempts. Meyer shoots 19 times versus Wisconsin. That's how it should be. I'm not saying he should shoot 19 times every game, but him and Terrence Shannon Jr. are the two guys that are capable of getting you 25 to 30, right? So they got to have the most shot attempts. So I just see a more cohesive unit. And like you said, Bill, hats off to Underwood, the way he's managed this season, because 3 weeks ago, we're sitting on here talking about the sky falling after they lose to Northwestern, and we're 0-3 in the Big Ten. then all of a sudden, 2.5 weeks later, we look up and they've won 6 of their last 7 games, and they're now 7-4 and basically tied for second in the Big Ten. So it just goes to show you that, like, patience is key for college basketball, and especially a new team.
For sure. I do think maybe the scary part for me is I just quickly looked at it. I think who we haven't played yet in the Big Ten scares me a little bit. Right now, we've just beaten up on the bottom half of the Big Ten. When you split it into top 7 versus bottom 7, we're 0-3 against the top 7, and we're 7-1 against the bottom 7, right? So I know we're going to get into it here, but a lot of that is chicken and the egg too. That some of those teams in the bottom 7, if we didn't beat them twice already, would probably be higher up. So I think there's a lot of pluses that have happened so far in the Big Ten. There's a lot of negatives, and it's just a matter of, for me, it's all shot selection, and then it's one thing. Brandon already. There's 2 things we're worse than 300th in the country in, right? And that's 3-point field goal percentage and free throw percentage, and that just shocks me. And our defense and our rebounding and like 2 toughness stats are top 20. So those are what you're going to hang your hat on in these big games coming up. So it's just going to be I still am not sure we know exactly what we have as far as like long-term projections. Is this going to be a Sweet 16 caliber team? I just don't know. The Big Ten's so confusing to watch this year. There's there's Purdue, and then there's just a bunch of teams that can beat anybody.
Yeah. Bill, you said we're 0-3 in the top 7 and 7-1 in the bottom 7. Is that where we are right now? Yeah, that's a good point to make. Obviously you could look at it on one side where you're winning the games you're supposed to win, right? But on the flip side, it's like, all right, when these tougher teams come to play, we got to figure something out to kind of notch some of these wins. And I think, like you just said, some of it is going to be going to come down to free throw shooting. Especially down the stretch, teams are going to scout, teams are going to watch film, they're going to look at statistics, they're going to say these guys are not good at the free throw line. Worst comes to worst, foul and put on the line and let's get an extra possession, and shot selection, 3-point shooting. When our shot selection is questionable, we're taking a lot of ill-advised threes. We're taking a lot of pass, we don't get anything. Okay, let's try to heave something and hope for a prayer. And I think we're letting teams off the hook when we do this, because we're so talented. You got guys that can get to the basket, guys that can make plays. I don't know what it is, but, once they figure that out where they don't have to put themselves in that position, it's going to be a scary night for other Big Ten teams for sure, because you're going to really have to guard us like that,
I think they also do a good job of, because you guys remember when you're playing, if you're not rolling offensively and you're really, really struggling offensively, that'll affect your defense, just emotionally, right? I think they do a really good job of not letting what happens on the offensive end really affect their defense. And that's a credit to the coaching staff and the players, right? They guard for 40 minutes. I haven't seen a game lately where you see them kind of lackadaisical defensively or making too many defensive mistakes when they're struggling offensively. And that kind of stuff bodes well for basketball in March. Yeah,
for sure. I think the thing with this team is, like, they say styles make fights, like the matchups. This team is so matchup dependent in my eyes. Like I said it before, but like it just hops off the page. When I see the Wisconsin game, I see the Nebraska game, I see the Ohio State game, I see 3 really slow but physical teams. And those teams with those guards that can like just kind of naturally keep anything out of the lane and force tough shots. Those are the teams that give us fits. You think of the Missouris of the world that beat us pretty good. So I think I'm really looking forward to this next slate of games, especially Iowa. I think athletically they're going to match up pretty well with us. It'll be interesting. I think the season's still undecided. We don't know if it's going to be a really successful season. It's just not obvious to me where we end up, and it's so exciting to watch.
Last thing I want to say,
Bill, that leads us right into our.
Oh, I was just going to say,
go ahead,
RJ Melendez, he made a pro move the other game where he made like a double jab step, one dribble, change direction, dunk, sleeper. Like he's so talented, and he hasn't played, I'm sure, just speaking as a player, I know he hasn't played as well as he wanted to play as far as shooting. His shooting has dropped, but, he has a great form, and I feel like he's due for a big one. And once he gets that big one, I think it's going to be smooth sailing for him, down the stretch. So I'm excited to see what he does next.
He's so bouncy, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's such a natural slasher. He can obviously shoot, but he's really struggled shooting the last couple of games.
Yeah.
You could tell they're almost like just shoot it every time.
Yeah.
They did that to me a
fearless.
couple of times. I'm sure Brandon's been there where your teammates are just like, just keep shooting. Like you'll eventually shoot through it. But right now it's tough to see. We all know he's a shooter. We're just not seeing it in the games. But he is like so bouncy. The second he gets a step on a defender, it is like it's highlight show time.
Yeah.
I also think he just like back to the point of roles being defined. He just seems, even though he's not shooting well, he just seems more comfortable in like when he gets in the game and he gets his 18 to 22 minutes, he's more confident in what he's doing. He's making more positive plays than negative plays.
Right.
And off the bench, like they all seem more comfortable in their roles right now.
Yeah.
That's
took two charges
Right.
last night in the Nebraska game. Shout out to the Maddo Award. Sam said it earlier. So like, yeah, he's that type of player, right? So eventually if he starts sprinkling in the threes on top of everything he does, he's one of those guys that, he rules the plus minus charts. And then I'm interested to hear your guys' opinion, because one thing we haven't brought up so far in all of our episodes is where Luke Goody fits in when he comes back. I mean, everyone says he's like, everyone who knows something about the program internally says he's probably the best shooter on the roster. But it is tough. You sit out the whole entire year and try and come back in the middle of the Big Ten after some of these roles get defined. I'm really interested to see what happens there with him.
Well, like you said, it's going to be tough, especially this far along in the season. But I think any kind of positive shooting that this team can get from beyond the arc is just going to be a good thing, and it's just going to open up things for everybody else. But it will be interesting to see how he, because he's already shortened his rotation, Underwood has. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in and where whose minutes he takes. He's got a year of experience under his belt, so that's obviously a positive for him, and he's not going to be afraid of the moment. But you know how it is, like when you're sitting out. I went through it, sitting out games, multiple games at a time. It's conditioning and rhythm. I was a rhythm player, so if I wasn't playing or practicing for a few weeks, it's really, really hard to get back in rhythm. I'm sure it was different for you, Brandon, as you're obviously a more natural athlete, and it might have been easier. But some guys, it takes time to get back in shape, back in rhythm, and it's tough to do in the middle of the season.
Yeah, and I think you look at who he's going to have to try and come back against, right? And who we haven't played yet: Purdue, Michigan, Iowa, Rutgers. You want to talk about
fire?
Yeah, you want to talk about like just absolute physical wars that you're going to have to try and ease yourself back in to the rotation. I just don't know. It'll be really, really interesting to see how Underwood handles inserting him into the lineup. I think, Sam, you hit on it when when we're 300th plus in the country in 3-point percentage. I didn't even know there was 300 teams in the country. Like that's absurd. Like
last?
No, I think maybe there's 315 or something like that. But I think he has to give it a shot, because if he's the type of guy that's going to shoot, 40% plus, which I think he's capable of doing from everything we hear, I just think you can't leave him off. He's exactly what this team needs, but is it too deep into the season after a foot injury to try and work through some things? They probably can't afford that as far as like a roster role defining thing goes at this point.
Yeah, I want to touch a little bit on last night, the rematch versus Nebraska. That's another scary kind of trap game, like we've talked about in previous pods, coming off a big win at Wisconsin. Shout out to the freshmen, right? Second half, and I thought it was interesting. And Bardo actually interviewed Underwood about this after the game. Did you guys notice that at halftime, Underwood, I saw it on Twitter too, Underwood came out with like 8 minutes left on the halftime clock and was sitting on the bench by himself with a clipboard. He wasn't in the locker room, which I don't think I've ever seen that before. And he interviewed, Bardo asked him about that after the game, and he's like, well, I follow them. Usually, he said at halftime, he gives the players a few minutes, the coaches talk, and then he goes in there and gives his spiel. He said he followed them right in the locker room, right after, like all the players, had 30 seconds of some stuff to say, and then walked out to the bench and let them, and that's a good sign of some leadership, right? Maybe the locker room, he's pissed off and he goes in there and lights them up and walks out, and they come out in the second half with a much better energy and attitude about him. Also, props to Underwood for knowing his team and finding different ways to motivate throughout a long, grueling, Big Ten season.
Yeah, I think silence sometimes can be like almost like when your parent is like more disappointed in you than mad at you, right? Brandon, I think back, and I know you were on this team, my junior year, we played at Clemson in the Big Ten ACC, and we were down 22 points, 23 points at halftime. It was the only game in my career where Bruce just came in and he just sat there. And we were down 23 points in the ACC Big Ten Challenge at halftime. And he just sat there, didn't say a word. And to this day, it's stuck in my mind because we came out there and had the biggest comeback that I've ever been a part of. Yeah. And we won the game down 23 at half. And he literally just came in and sat there. And I thought that was, you can't use that trick all the time or else you're kind of just, you're letting stuff go.
Right.
But I thought, at this point in the season, sometimes coaches have been yelling so much that you can start
Tune them out.
Right. And so you need to change the strategy a little bit. And they did. They do come out flat a lot. Right. So you think about Wisconsin, how many points they had in the first 5 minutes? I think it was like 2 or 4. You think about last night against Nebraska, their point guard, their taller point guard, was it Greisel? Or I don't know.
He's a good player.
Yeah, he was kind of getting off a little bit. They just needed some energy. And I think, you guys have both touched on it, but I thought Ty Rodgers, he got put on him and kind of shut him down. His defense, energy, rebound. He had like 4 or 5 offensive rebounds.
6, I think.
Oh, did he have 6? Yeah, I should look at the box score. Yeah, just the energy guys that came off the bench, and I know Underwood was super complimentary of Sincere Harris and Ty Rodgers. I think they kind of, sometimes you need that just to wake your team up and wake some of the older guys. Sometimes it's too easy to, you've just done it so much, you don't get too worked up about anything. And you can come out and maybe start slow and get certain games that's going to hurt you. So I'd like to see them get that corrected.
Now, those 3 freshmen last night completely changed the game in the second half. I mean, it was evident. And I would say of those 3, Jaden, like we've talked about, I haven't had a moment this year in watching Illinois and said like Sincere Harris a few times, Ty Rodgers, you can tell they make some freshman mistakes. You could see it. I haven't said that once about Jaden all year. Like, I haven't been like, oh, that's just a freshman mistake there. I'll learn from that. He plays like an upperclassman. Mm-hmm. But those 3 last night, I mean, you got to give a shout out to those guys because I think that they were the deciding factor in the second half of that game. No doubt about it.
Jaden's IQ is next level. Like, he's, like you just said, he plays like an upperclassman. Yep. He plays with a chip on his shoulder every night. He goes out there, he's fearless. And, just with a little bit of more experience, Bill, you talked about it a few podcasts ago. Like, he's player of the year type of candidate where he's out there and he's not out there trying to do too much. Like, it's not like he's out there trying to make too many plays. He's just playing basketball. And you can tell players like that, they just get it, whether he's watching film, whether he's just at home by himself watching the game and seeing what other players do. You can tell that he's a player that wants to get to the next level. And speaking about the Clemson game, I think we had the record for the comeback in Illinois history for damn near a decade until I want to say one of the teams Underwood has coached the last few years broke it. I don't remember which game this was, but they were down a lot, and they came back and won it. But another big win you can add to the column, and another win that you say a win that you're supposed to take, a win that you're supposed to add to the collection so that you can still look up around the world. And at the end of the year, you're like, okay, we feel good about the position we're in.
So let's transition to a little bit of a scouting report. So next game, Iowa on the road. You guys can both talk a little bit about playing at Iowa. They're the highest scoring team in the Big Ten this year. I feel like Iowa didn't used to be. So I feel like the last 6 to 8 years, McCaffrey's really changed their style, and they get up and down and they score. And they got Chris Murray, who's the second leading scorer in the Big Ten, I think, behind Edey. 5 guys averaging double figures. That's pretty rare for a college basketball team. So here's another challenge, right? On the road at Iowa, a game you're quote unquote supposed to win. How do you approach that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, you touched on it. Fran McCaffrey's a hell of a coach, right? This is also one of those games where they kind of look at us as their rivalry. I don't think we think too much of them as one of our rivals. Yeah. But no, I mean, Indiana says that about us, right? Like their rivals Purdue, but we always get up for that game. I think there's a really similar vibe when you go to Iowa. Their fans, a lot of their students applied to Illinois and couldn't get in and ended up having to go to Iowa, excuse me. And so there's that. There's like a little hatred there. Fran McCaffrey. I mean, I got to play against Licklider my freshman or sophomore year, and their program was down in the dumps. Mm-hmm. Like the second that McCaffrey got there, all of a sudden the Iowa games weren't just like an easy walkover victory anymore. And so I always have a lot of respect for him as a coach, what he's been able to do with that program. His son is back after an extended absence for mental health, and he hit 3 threes in his first game back, I believe. Then you've got, Keegan Murray's little brother, just 2.0, just scoring machine in all different type of ways. So really interested. This is one of those top half of the Big Ten games. So you get started off with like kind of the mid tier of the top half. Really interested to see how this plays out.
I just looked at the roster. Is this the first year in like 12 years there's not a Bohannon on the team? I mean, yeah. Am I wrong? Do you guys feel the same way? Like every single year I watch Iowa, there's a Bohannon,
it's a requirement for the basketball team. Yeah, they need to have one every like 3-4 years.
Was that the same one? I think he was just there for like 6 years because I played against the Bohannon at Wisconsin for a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that was his. But I just remembered Bohannon.
I think that was his brother.
There's never been a Bohannon in NCAA basketball that hasn't went to Wisconsin or Iowa. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
Never.
That's the Corn Belt is the Bohannon basketball capital of the world.
So Brandon, let's pick out like 2 things you want to see from this Illinois team in this Iowa game.
Like you just said, Bill, it's a game you're supposed to win. McCaffrey, he's an intense coach. He's on them all game, kind of similar to like I said before, like a European style coach, where very animated, but he knows his stuff. He knows his X's and O's. I need to see Illinois come out there and have a better shot selection. I just want to see one game where they're not out there playing like hot potato at the end of the shot clock, where they're looking for a shot. They're talented enough to do it and still, battle out a win. But I want to see them, they don't need sets every single time down the court. They're so talented. They don't need a set to score. They got Terrence Shannon. They got Matt Meyer. They got Dane Danger. They got Jaden Apps they're all capable of making plays by themselves, whether it's in transition, whether they're breaking down plays. I want to see when things aren't going their way, when stuff starts to get ugly, Iowa goes on a run. I want to see them kind of compose themselves and make Iowa pay, make them play a full shot clock, kind of like what a Northwestern might do to you or what a Wisconsin might do to you, And I think if they do that, if they solidify themselves at the free throw line, they're going to go out there and take care of business like they're supposed to.
Yeah, and it's such a different team, this Illinois team, than previous years, because if you think the last few years, pretty much they went as Iowa went, right? And then last year, it's really like they rode Kofi so much that like when that failed and teams were able to combat him, they didn't really have, anything else to go to, right? Mm-hmm. I think the difference in this team is they can beat you in different ways, which I've seen a lot of the last few weeks, a la Wisconsin. Terrence Shannon Jr., best player, goes down with 2 fouls. Dane picks him up. Last night versus Nebraska, 3 freshmen come in and completely changed the game defensively, and they squeak out that win, right? So it's not it's almost like every game's a different movie, right? A different picture, which I think is a good thing, because the later you get in the season, you're going to have to find different ways to scratch and claw and win games. And they've proven that they can do that, right? Mm-hmm. Versus riding one guy, and if he doesn't play well, or 2 guys, and they don't play well, you have no chance of winning. They've proven that if their top dogs aren't playing as well as they'd want them to be, that they find other ways to win basketball games. And that's a big deal in this conference.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would just add 2 things I really want to see. One, push the ball, push it down their throats. Like, I don't care if it's a made basket or a missed basket. just get the ball, get it down to Dane, and let him kick it back out and let it touch both wings. Like, God, there were some plays in that Nebraska game last night where when we shot, we're like naturally good ball fakers and shot fakers. We use that to get in the lane, and when we don't just use it to fire it up, when we use it to like make a man help and then push it out, the shots, like, they fall. Like, when we're 2 feet on the ground and set, our 3-point shooting is actually good, despite what the percentages say. So I want to see them push the ball. I think that's so important, especially for when Sincere's in the game. I think that would put my number one, and then maybe fast start, right? I think Iowa's the type of place with that atmosphere, with that coach. If you get down 5 to 10 points in that first half, it's going to be a really tough mountain to climb coming back. And I just haven't seen a lot of fast starts. So I want to see those two things in the Iowa game.
Brandon, anything to add?
No.
Now let's move to our favorite segment.
Yeah, let's do it.
Word on campus.
Word on campus. Let's do it.
So last, I don't know if we'll ever top last pod, Word on Campus, Bill's famous line and what happened at Indiana. But we talked a little bit about, let's talk about, so my least favorite, I should say. So in college basketball, the 5 years I spent playing college basketball was obviously an unbelievable experience.
For 17 years, bro.
Yeah. I wouldn't
you
trade
have the
for
nerve
world.
to talk about Bohannon.
But I was 4.5 years. These dudes are doing like 6 and 7 years because of COVID.
Dog years.
I swear. They got 4 degrees. So what I hated the most, though, and let's see if you guys agree, loved and hated, but like, you remember that time, like you get back to school after the long summer, working out, et cetera, and then you do some, open gyms and get back acclimated, and then you're just leading up to the day preseason conditioning starts. Like, obviously the day they tell you it's going to start, but like every day you get closer to preseason conditioning, you're like dreading it, right? Like, there was nothing, like I was never, and I never will be in as good a shape as I was in those 4 years when
it's impossible.
Like, post 6
the
weeks.
conditioning college is nothing. First of all, it makes no sense. It's impossible to get in shape for basketball unless you actually play basketball.
Right. It's like glorified boot camp.
Yeah, when people watch us, they're like, "Oh man, these guys are in shape. They work out." They have no idea the stuff that they put you through in college. Like, it's damn near. It's like I don't even want to use the word slavery. It's crazy what they put us through, from conditioning on court to doing, obstacle courses, to doing the mile run, to doing the Indian run, you name it. And it was all just straight fear for like several weeks at a time.
I think there's rules now, though. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I think we were in school, at least my first 2 or 3 years in school.
There were no rules.
Before there were these like rules where the coaches can be with you and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was way worse. I don't know what it's like now.
My senior year, when Gross came, after they got rid of Weber and the staff, Gross came, and that's like the only time where I think they like put limits. That was like the year they put limits on the time you could spend on the court with the coach. Mm-hmm. And still they found loopholes, figure that one out. They found loopholes.
Yeah, I mean, Sam, you hit the nail on the head. I don't know if I've ever lost sleep like I used to lose sleep the day before, fall conditioning starts. It's like we used to have this thing. Coach Weber made every team he ever had for 30 years do it. You had to test out of the mile, right? So guards had to run a mile in 5:30, and bigs, didn't matter if you were 7'1", Mike Tisdale, you had to run a mile in 6 minutes or less. And you ran it every morning until you made it. I mean, I remember Trent Meacham, who's a phenomenal player, but he was just like, he was so stocky for a guard. Like, he was jacked. If you ever saw Trent with his shirt off, you'd be like, oh, that's an Abercrombie model. But no, seriously. And he only ate like nuts and cherries. It was crazy. And he would run the mile, like he had to run the mile like 3 weeks in a row, like getting up at
every
5
day?
a.m. Yeah, like going to the armory with Coach McClain.
Run it until it's over with.
And so that's what scared the hell out of me. Is I used to dread it, because my best miles ever were like 5:50, and I had like 10 seconds. And I'm talking, for me, that was all out.
And these are like great starts too.
Yeah, and I'm like, the worst day of my life, I swear, was one time I had just like dove across, I like blacked out and dove across the line with like 5 seconds left. And Coach McClain came out, was like, how he is, just walked out to the track and was like checking on everything that was going on. And he was like, no, Billy, why would you be running that with a 6-minute pace? You're a guard. What else have you done with the bigs this year besides run the mile with them? And I was like, oh no, he's just messing with me, right? Like, no chance. Like, I truly thought, I was like, well, I'm going to have to transfer. There's no way I can run a 5:30 mile.
Nah, bro, the miles were
Did they make you redo it?
outrageous.
No, I somehow sweet talked my way out of it. I was like, I might as well just
I'll
just
never
quit.
I'll never understand why we had to do that, which we'll ask Bruce when we have him on. I mean, I kind of get it, but I only had to do it obviously 1 year, but I just remember I was nursing, obviously. When was I not nursing an ankle injury? But I was just fresh off, still in my like recovery from my surgery and whatnot, and I wasn't doing a ton with the team at the time. I was kind of doing my own conditioning stuff, trying to ramp up. So I'm like, I'm out of the mile. Like, they're not gonna make me run this. Like, there's no way they're gonna make me run this shit. Like, I'm still like, got to get certain milestones with my ankle before I do something like crazy like that. And I'll never forget the day I walked in. Thinking I'm not going to run it, right? Everybody's getting ready to run it. And I walked in the training room, and Al, shout out Al Martindale again, was like, trying to get my treatment and whatnot. And he's like, hey, go get your stuff on. We got the mile today. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm running that? And he's like, yeah, you can run it. And I'm like, are you serious right now? You really? And I'll never forget, I wasn't in shape or anything, so I wasn't prepared for this. So they made me run it, which was probably not a good thing. But I just remember being in the locker room before we went out there, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I've never timed myself on a mile, so I got to run this at 5:30. So I remember turning though and seeing DJ. DJ's got like a full thing of like nachos or cheese fries, and this is like, mind you, 10 minutes before we're going to run a mile, and we got to do it guards 5:30 and in bigs 6 or whatever it was, and he's just munching on cheese fries like all nonchalant. And of course he goes out there and runs it in like
freak of nature.
Yeah, runs it in like 4:44 or something. But I vaguely remember the only thing I tried to do in that thing, it was pure adrenaline that I made it. I ran it in 5:16.
That's ridiculous.
Was I tried to keep up with Brandon as much as I could for like the first 2 laps, not try to overdo it, but kind of stay at a steady pace with Brandon because I knew he'd make it. And then I like blacked out the third lap, and the 4th lap was like pure adrenaline, and I somehow did it, but I don't think I did any conditioning for like 4 days after that. I can't believe they made me run that.
It was crazy, and DJ was a freak of nature. Like, he would just run it. He would just go out there and run it in like 5 minutes, 5 seconds.
Like he was jogging.
Yeah, and like Bubba Chisholm was the other guy that would go out there. It would be him and DJ. Like, before you came there, it would be like him and DJ, like, who's going to run it in the quickest time? And I missed it one time in my career. I missed it one time, and it was like, I think I got it in 5:30, and they literally walked up to me afterwards and was just like, you should have beat 5:30. You're going to run it again. I was just like, yo, like, this is asinine. Like, why are you guys making us do this? This is crazy. And sometimes we would go out and run the mile, come back in, and they'd be like, all right, we got some stuff on the court. We would run like 17s or like 10 and 10, and just like, what is this? What are we doing here? But the other things that they used to do is, if you won after, like, we would come inside, if you won like sprints, we would do like a certain amount of sprints. If you won a certain amount, you would be able to finish. So I would like go all out on the sprints, and I would finish with Mike Davis. We would win a few, he would win a few, and I would be done. And I'm just like, yo, this is crazy. And then we get to the pro. Now as a professional, you don't do any of that conditioning stuff. Your conditioning is preseason and just playing 5-on-5. And it's just like, college was crazy. College was like literally the hardest of my entire career. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I feel like it was also like somewhat detrimental because they overdo it so much in preseason.
Yeah.
And I think obviously coaches have a better grasp on it now, it's the strength and conditioning coaches are light years ahead of where they were, 15, 20 years ago. But I just feel like I'd be exhausted by like early February.
It'd be shot. We used to joke with our trainers.
If we didn't do like the crazy 6 weeks of, like you said, Brandon, like the best way to get in shape is to play basketball and get up and down. That's the only way you can get in basketball shape. Now I get conditioning, like you got to do it, but some of it I feel like was just so overdone, and I found myself in like mid-February like super exhausted, and I have to think it had something to do with all that shit we did before the season.
Yeah. Well, you two were never I was on the goddamn, you got to make weight crew, like the skinny guys. And the biggest fallacy in the world was you'd come in, they'd be like, all right, Bill, you got to be 217 tomorrow. I'd come in at like 215 after trying to eat like 6 Arby's number 4s. And
they make you chug water.
Well, they make me chug water, and then they'd make us go run 6,000 miles. And they'd be like, why aren't you gaining weight? You're like, bro, I'm burning thousands of calories a day.
I watched them for hours try to make Tisdale gain weight. And I'm just, at some point, I'm just like, yo, this kid's not gaining any weight. You can give him as many protein shakes as you want to. This kid is not gaining any weight. It's just his body.
I'll never forget. We used to go to the weight room before we weighed in and shove like the little 2.5 pounds up our compression shorts. And like my senior, I got away with it for like a year and a half. And then like at the end of my senior year, one just like fell out right in front of Jimmy. And he's like, "Oh, Billy." He's like, "I'll see you out at the track, buddy." And you're just like,
they couldn't wait. They couldn't wait until they caught you or something. Cause then they were like, I'm about to kill this dude. And they used to load up the plates on the bench press. And I would walk in like, Myers would be happy. Myers would be like, "Oh yeah, I'm ready to do this." And I would look at it. I'd be like, "Yo, I'm not Delvon Rowe. What do you want me to do with this 4 plates on each side? What do you want me to do with this? Right. This is not happening."
Yeah, that stuff was wild. I think it's so different now. But to anybody that is watching, like we didn't just, contrary to what you believe, we didn't just go to school, party, and show up for practice and games and have a great time. Like we did have a great time, but there was a lot of work involved in it. But all good stuff. So to recap, 6 out of the last 7 for the Illini, right? So Illini fans flying high. I think those Illinois loyalty message boards are lit up right now. Yeah. But some big games coming up, like we talked about. This team is coming together. You could see it before our eyes. Obviously not a finished product. You don't expect to be in early February, but I thought, Bill, a really good point you mentioned is keep an eye on when Luke Goody's coming back and how they kind of get him acclimated back to the team. But some good wins. Obviously, Matt Meyer has woken up. He's gotten very comfortable, double figures in his last 8 games, I believe, besides that flu game. We'll throw that one in the trash versus Indiana. Mm-hmm. But they look good. Underwood seems to have the locker room back. So good things coming. Let's see what they do versus Iowa and that high octane offense, and how they handle that adversity and that, because they're going to go on runs and that crowd's going to be raucous. So let's see how they handle that. And, we'll circle back and check with everybody. So again, thanks for joining, Billy and Brandon. Good seeing you guys again. Glad you're doing well. Good stuff today. Bringing the fire, bringing the heat. We'll check back with you guys here in a few days. Thanks for joining Champaign Room Hoops Podcast. See you, everybody.
Beyond the Big Ten is a network of podcasts that aims to be your go-to resource for all things Big Ten. We cover the entire conference with shows hosted by ex-players and athletic alumni, aiming to be your go-to source of information and entertainment for your favorite team. Hosted by ex-Big Ten players, media, and insiders, our podcasts are focused on giving diehard fans and those alums an inside scoop about the teams and people that make the Big Ten Conference one of the most watched and most talked about conferences in sports. We're excited to talk Big Ten basketball with you wherever you may be. Subscribe now.